Today we're going to be learning Masechet Nedarim Daf Daled. This is the daf for Shabbat. We're going to get started with a quick review of where we left off. There's a sheet, a study guide today, which you can find on the website. You can find it in the details of the podcast, recommended to use. It'll help organize where we're going and where we're coming from, where we're moving to. So we started with a question on the Gemara. The Gemara had said, Baal ta'acher de nazirut heche mishkachala. Back to Daf Gimel, we had a braita, which compared to the heikesh. Because it appears in the same pasuk, neder and nazirut, it says we're going to learn from Nedarim to nazirut and from nazirut to Nedarim. So one of the things that we learn is that just like in a neder, if I commit to bringing, to doing something, most likely a korban, a sacrifice, and then I don't bring it in time, which what in time is, that's a whole other question, but I don't bring it in time, I'm liable for Baal ta'acher, for delaying. Likewise, the same holds true for nazirut, to which the Gemara says, where would you have a case of that in nazirut? Basically, you say, I'm going to be a nazir, and then you go ahead and be a nazir, and then you drink wine or you eat grapes, which is forbidden. At that point, it's not that you pushed off being a nazir, it's that you violated nazirut and you drank wine. So that's Baal tochal, you're not allowed to eat grapes. That's the problem, not that you delayed it. To which the Gemara gave two answers in yesterday's daf. One first suggestion was when you say, when I'll become a nazir. To which the Gemara said, well, then there's no Baal ta'acher. If you said, when I want, I'll become a nazir, then there is no specific time you were supposed to be. So then they said, maybe it's someone who said, I will not leave this world until I'm going to be a nazir. From that moment, they're basically considered a nazir, just in case they die. We brought a comparison to that. That could be a potential case of when someone, if they then delay it, then they're delaying. Third option. Rav Acha bar Yaakov, starting from the top of Daf Daled down. Amal kigon dinadal v'hu bebeit hakvarot. Now, a nazir is not allowed to become impure to a dead body. So if a nazir says, I'm going to become a nazir, and they happen to be in a cemetery, so then they're pushing off their nazirut. Well, and then they'll be liable for Baal ta'acher because they have to wait till they get out of cemetery until they become a nazir, and that's pushing it off. To which the Gemara says, wait a minute, there's actually a debate about what happens when someone says, I go into a cemetery and I say, I'm going to be a nazir. Am I a nazir at this point or am I not? So if you hold lo nazirut me'alter, the nazirut doesn't actually happen right then and there, then I'm liable because I'm pushing it off. But it doesn't matter that right now I'm in a cemetery and I can't really start my nazirut. But the fact is, it starts right now. Okay, so I haven't. In that case, there's no Baal ta'acher. I'm actually starting my nazirut. Now it's true I'm in a cemetery and there's a problem with that, but technically speaking, my nazirut is begun. So you can't claim, well, you're pushing it off because I'm not. But right then, mi'ika Baal ta'acher. Then there is no right. Is this Baal ta'acher? No, of course not. So according to, again, if you hold nazirut didn't hit right now, right, didn't start, the clock didn't start ticking, then I'm actually responsible for Baal ta'acher. But now the Gemara says, even with that, we're going to have a problem. The odd, Hamal Malba Rav Ashi, didn't the son of Rav Ashi say, Chayle nazirut ale me'alter? Both agree that the nazirut starts right away. The debate is, kipligile in your malka. The question here is, do you actually get lashes though? Because right, I'm in a cemetery. I say, I'm going to be a nazir right now, but I'm in the cemetery. So I become impure to a dead body right immediately because it starts. But since I said it while I was in the cemetery, do I get lashes for that or do I not get lashes for that? That's the debate. But everybody thinks that it starts right then. So then we're stuck because then there really is no Baal ta'acher. To which the Gemara says, no. We're going to explain that there is Baal ta'acher here. You are responsible for delaying. Why? It's true that technically speaking, your nazirut has begun, but you're basically pushing off the nazirut with purity, meaning you can't really be a nazir. Like technically speaking, maybe your nazirut started, but you can't really be a nazir until you've come out of the cemetery, waited the 7 days to become pure. So you basically delayed the start of your nazirut in right bitahara, that's done in a proper manner. So technically, maybe you're a nazir, but you can't really be a nazir until, right, if you're in the middle of your nazirut, for example, if you became impure to a dead body, you start counting from the beginning, and you have to wait the 7 days to become pure. So therefore, it's no different than that, really. To which the Gemara says, now, I'm a Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi comes in and says, wait a minute. Since we just found an explanation for Baal Ta'acher in this example, where you became a nazir while you're in a cemetery, and you're basically responsible because you pushed off your nazirut, well, the same thing would hold true in the case I just said a second ago, which is, if I intentionally became impure to a dead body while I was a nazir, I knew that it was forbidden, I did it anyway, I didn't care. Then it would be the same thing. I could actually be liable for pushing off my nazirut once I already began. Let's say I'm a nazir for 10 days, and then there's a funeral, and I say, I don't care that I'm a nazir, I'm going to the funeral. So, I'd be over mishum bal ta'acher de nazirut tahara. Since we just explained that there could be this issue of bal ta'acher by pushing off nazirut in tahara, in a pure state, then it would be the same thing if I became impure in the middle of my nazirut. So now we have answer 3, which actually is 2 answers, which is either you could have bal ta'acher if I took on the nazirut, became a nazir while I was in a cemetery, or while I was already a nazir, I basically decide to become impure to a dead body intentionally, and then I'm liable also for pushing off the nazirut. Okay, next. Rav Acha, 4th answer. We're going to have altogether 5 answers, right? 3 today, and we had 2 yesterday. Rav Acha bereid Rav Ikama, ovel b'bal ta'acher tiglachato. There's different processes the nazir does. One of them is he brings sacrifices, 3 of them. Okay, we're going to get to that in another few minutes, which is he brings a korban chatat, which we're going to talk about, a sin offering. Why he brings a sin offering, not so clear. What did the nazir do wrong? This is a regular nazir, not someone who became impure to a dead body. Then we have a korban olah, a burnt offering that goes all the way up, and a shlamim, a peace offering. So now, after the nazir, when the nazir finishes the nazirut, the nazir, he or she, will bring these 3 sets of korbanot, and then there's this tiglacha, shaving of the nazir's hair. So now they say, well, if you push off the shaving of the hair, that could be the problem of bal ta'acher. Maybe that's what the braita is referring to. You don't even need to say it. If you hold, there's machloket apparently, if you hold that the tiglachat prevents you from basically ending your nazirut, you basically are still going to be forbidden to drink wine and all those other things until such time as you shave. Well, if you say that's essential and you can't do anything else, obviously then you'll be liable for bal ta'acher, and we could explain it that way. Even the one who says that it doesn't prevent you. You can finish your nazirut, you bring your sacrifices, you didn't shave your hair, it's fine. You're not a nazir anymore. Even if you say that, mitzvah giluach v'alo makayim, you still haven't fulfilled the mitzvah of shaving off your hair. So you could still be liable bal ta'acher there. That was answer number 4. Answer number 5. Marzutra bereder of Miriam ovel b'bal ta'acher korbonotav. So we get back to the sacrifices. By pushing off, if you decide, I'm not giving my sacrifices on the day you're supposed to, then you can be liable for pushing off your sacrifices. Now the Gemara says, wait a minute. Bal ta'acher of sacrifices, there's general law by sacrifices that you can't push off sacrifices. Usually there's a debate about exactly what, but it has something to do with the 3 holidays, whether all different opinions. We've seen this machloka before. I don't want to get into it, but the idea is that there's general bal ta'acher by sacrifices, always. You can't delay them, right? There's actually a debate here whether we mean pushing off your sacrifices. Does it mean that you didn't do it on the day that you finish your nazirut, right? The day after when you're supposed to do them? Or does it mean past the 3 holidays or the regular laws of bal ta'acher? There's a debate about that. But either way you look at it, have some sort of issue of bal ta'acher, either by pushing it off by a day, or maybe by pushing it off, until the end of that year, or the end of those next 3 holidays. Again, it's about 5 different opinions about what the bal ta'acher is by sacrifices. I don't want to get into that now. To which the Gemara says, wait, Rabbi Marzutra, you're going to say that this issue is, again, we're going to learn from Nedarim to nazirut, that when it comes to the sacrifices of the nazir, if you push them off, you're going to be liable because balta acher, you pushed it off. To which the Gemara questions and says, what do you mean? Min hachanaf gale, you're going to learn that from this heikesh, from neder? Mehatam nafgale, you should just learn it from the regular laws of sacrifices. Ki darosh yidrashenu is part of a longer pasuk. I brought it on the sheet. The pasuk is Devarim, chapter 23, verse 22. Ki tidor neder l'Hashem lokecha, when you make a vow to God to bring a sacrifice, lo ta'acher l'shalmo, don't delay, ki darosh yidrashenu Hashem lokecha mi'imach v'yavachachet, because God is going to demand it from you, and you'll sin if you don't do that. So now they say, what is darosh yidrashenu? Elu chataot v'hashamot. These include a chatat and an asham, a sin offering and a guilt offering. Now the nazir brings a sin offering. So shouldn't you be able to learn the sin offering of the nazir from here, that there's balta acher, and you don't need a whole heikesh, this comparison of neder and nazir in the pasuk. It's learned out from a more simple manner, from all the laws of general korbanot, sacrifices. To which the Gemara says, well, ma'u detema chidushu shechidsha Torah b'nazir. You might have thought this is a unique law that the Torah taught us by nazir. In other words, nazir is different from all other korbanot. It has a unique nature, in which case we can't learn the laws of balta acher from there. We need to learn them some other way, which is going to be this heikesh, this juxtaposition of neder and nazir in the pasuk, and that's what. Sounds nice, but what's the chiddush? And for that, again, we're going to have a set of answers. We're going to have 4 answers. The first 2 you can already see from the chart if you look. I know the chart's all in Hebrew, and for some of you that might be difficult, but even just viewing the chart will help you. On one side, we have what's the chiddush, what's the suggestion. Then we have a rejection of it. So the first 2 will be rejected. The third one stands, and the fourth one stands as well. There's going to be a question, and then they're going to respond and give an answer to the. They're going to try to reject it, but they're going to actually resolve the rejection. So now, let's start with our list of our 4 possible chiddushim of what is unique about nazir. My chiddush. Normally, you can decide, I'm going to bring a sacrifice by using the language of a neder. I vow to bring a sacrifice. Now, with a chatat of a nazir, the sin offering of a nazir, you can't say, I'm taking a vow to bring the sin offering of a nazir. It doesn't work that way. You can only bring the sin offering of a nazir if you took upon yourself to be a nazir, not if you say, I'm going to take a vow that I'm going to bring the sin offering of a nazir. You can't do that. It doesn't operate by itself. So maybe that's what's unique about it. And therefore, maybe you would think the laws of balta acher don't apply. But we're going to give another example of a sin offering that you can't take a vow about either. And yet it's part of the regular laws of balta acher. So that obviously isn't the parameter that makes this unique, that makes it not part of balta acher, of delaying the offering. What is it? The classic sin offering is when you eat chaylev. It's the example they often bring. You eat forbidden fats of an animal. There's certain fats you're not allowed to eat, not knowing it was forbidden. And then when you find out, you bring a sacrifice. That chatat is also something in matpisa b'neder. You can't say, I vow to bring a sin offering for eating chaylev. No, it doesn't. It's not an obligation that comes based on your vow. It's an obligation because you did something wrong. So, and yet, over balta acher, if you did that and you're supposed to bring your korban chatat, you don't bring it within the allotted time, you're responsible. So that can't be the unique thing about nazir, that you can't take upon yourself the chatat by a vow, because also the chatat of the chaylev, you can't take a vow and obligate yourself this kind of sin offering. So let's try a second option. Elamai chidushin. If I say I'm going to be a nazir just from the dregs of the grapes, okay? Now, this is just a part of the grape. It says mizagba chartzan. These are parts of the grape that the Torah says the nazir can't eat. But obviously, the nazir can't eat the whole grape, and the nazir can't drink wine and other things as well. So if I say I'm going to be a nazir, even mina chartzan, right, which means, just 1 second, son having nazir, right? If I say even, sorry, there's something I'm missing for a second. There. Right, that's what I thought it was. The language just doesn't match. But even if he says only from the chartzan, okay, the chartzan, are the seeds, okay, only from the seeds, and I'm not going to accept anything else upon myself, then nazir have a nazir lakol. Okay, this is a unique halacha by nazir, that if I say I'm going to be a nazir only from the great pits, okay, just that's the only thing I'm not going to eat, I actually become a nazir for everything. There's no such thing as nazirut for just the pits of the grapes. It's all or nothing. And we're going to see now there's two opinions, but both opinions agree it's all or nothing. This one's going to say it's all. So now, if that's the case, so if you say that you're going to be a nazir lakol for everything, maybe that's a unique halacha. And therefore, maybe you don't have this issue of balta acher. And that's why you need, right? In other words, again, this is going to then take nazirut out of the category of regular sacrifices, and it's going to put it in its own category that maybe doesn't have balta acher. That's why we need, again, the braita to say the juxtaposition. Neder nazir teaches you there's also balta acher by nazirut. So kamash malan, that's why you needed the heikesh, the juxtaposition. It's a little bit problematic, and we're going to get to this in a minute, but in case you're already thinking about it, because when I started learning it, I immediately was thinking something doesn't jive there. Why? And this is going to be the Gemara's second question on this, but I want to raise it right away, because to say I'm going to be a nazir only from the great pits, and then that means I'm a nazir for everything, that's what we call a chumrah. That's much more stringent. Now, once it's more stringent, we're not going to think that you're exempt from balta acher. The logic doesn't really say that. If it's a chiddush that makes it more strict, then we're going to be more strict with you, and obviously balta acher is going to be an issue. So that's going to be question number 2 on this. But first, let's get to question number 1. Now we're going to see there's a machloket about this. That only works if you say ki nazir min hachartzan have nazir lakol. But that's if you say what we just said, which is you will be a nazir for everything. Ela Rabbi Shimon damar ein nazir ad sheyazir mikulan. But to Rabbi Shimon, it says you're only going to be a nazir if you say I'm not going to be a nazir, and I'm going to be a nazir, and I'm not going to drink wine, and I'm not going to become impure to dead bodies, and I'm not going to eat grapes, and I'm not going to eat the pits and the dregs and all that. Then ma'ika lemeimar. Then how you can explain this? Meaning that's not a chiddush. Then it's not any sort of unique halacha. Ve'od, and all the more so, right? So in that case, by the way, if I say, according to that opinion, I'm only a nazir for eating grape pits, I'm actually not a nazir at all, because again, it's all or nothing. One says it's all, and one says it's nothing. So anyway, that's not a chiddush then. Ve'od, and furthermore, now we're going to go back to what I mentioned as a problem. That's a more strict halacha, chiddush. We need to find something that makes it more lenient, in which case we might have thought that balta acher does not apply. Ela my chiddush. So what is the chiddush then? Well, you might have thought, this is answer number 3. You might have thought, turning now to Amud Ho'il ve'im gilech al chamish shloshtan yatsa. Since you're supposed to, what did I tell you? 3 sacrifices, and after that, you shave. What if you shaved after doing only one of the sacrifices? Yatsa, you actually fulfill your obligation, and your nazirut is over. So you might have thought that's a leniency. Since that's a leniency, you might have thought, maybe you won't actually transgress balta acher of actual normal sacrifices, because there's a whole leniency here by the sacrifices. So maybe balta acher doesn't kick in. And that actually, therefore, kamash malan. That's why we needed the juxtaposition of neder and nazir to teach you, just like there's balta acher by neder, there's also balta acher by nazir. That's answer number 3, and that stands. Answer number 4, ibait ema, second possibility. And now we actually go back to section 4th possibility, just 1 and 2 were rejected, but we're actually going back to option number 1, and we asked a question, and we're going to resolve that question. My chiddush, mishum de lo matpiso beneder. Now we said possible chiddush was, since you can't take upon a chatat with the language of a vow. The hadat, right, the chatat of a nazir. The hadat kakashel chatat chelev. Well, you wanted to question it from chatat chelev. by saying, well, that's a sin offering that you can't do by a vow either, and yet there's regular laws of Baal Ta'acher, you can't ask that question. Because Chatat Chelev, Ka'ate L'Kapara, Chatat Nazir L'Mai Atya. The fascinating line, the Chatat of Chelev comes to atone for something you did wrong. Generally, sin offerings come to atone. And I say generally because here we're going to have an exception. Chatat Nazir L'Mai Atya. We don't even know why you bring a Chatat when you're a Nazir. Chatat of a Nazir is very strange. It's one of these questions they really grappled with. Some of the commentaries actually explain, we have some opinions in the Gemara, we'll get to this later, that actually it's bad to become a nazir because maybe you were an alcoholic and you had to swear yourself off of wine. It's not good. And this is the whole idea that Dr. Ayelet Hoffman-Lipson, if you haven't heard her intro yet, talks about in the intro to Nedarim, we also discuss this, which is, right, there's always a big deliberation about how to view neder. Is a vow a good thing? Is nazirut a good thing or not a good thing? So some take the approach, it's actually really bad. And that's why you have to bring a korban chatat. Okay? And then it is really more like a sin offering. But this Gemara is saying, it's clearly you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't sin. So therefore, what's this chatat nazir coming for? If not, to basically say, right, then we basically have a chatat that's not like the chelev. So forget the question we asked about the chatat chelev. We really don't have anything like this that theoretically is something voluntary you took upon yourself, and yet you can't do it by language of a vow. And as the sacrifice can't be taken on by saying, I vow to bring the chatat of a nazir. And then that would make it unique. So now they say, and then, right, we would say, because of that, right, therefore, we wouldn't necessarily, maybe laws of Baal Ta'acher don't apply. But now they say, again, because you can't take it upon yourself as a vow. But wait, we have another sin offering that's very similar in this way to the chatat of a nazir. The chatat of a yoled, a woman who gives birth, that's another famous one, that the commentaries grappled with. Why on earth does she bring a sin offering? What did a woman who gave birth do wrong? Right? The famous is that she screamed during labor, swearing that she was never going to have another child. And maybe that's why she's bringing a sin offering. But that's not necessarily the reason. That's a reason given, but it's also very troublesome or confusing why she's actually told by the Torah to bring a sin offering. So it's also one that doesn't come to atone for anything. Again, you have to remember, this source disagrees with that whole approach that both the nazir and the yoled actually did something wrong. This sugya doesn't seem to believe that at all. And yet, Baal Ta'acher applies. So clearly this isn't the chiddush that, right, because the yoled also you can't be matpis b'neder. You can't say, I vow to take upon myself the sacrifice of a yoled, right? You only do that if you actually give birth. And likewise, the same thing with the nazir. And yet, laws of Baal Ta'acher apply there, so they should apply as well by the nazir, to which the Gemara says, no. That's different. Baal Ta'acher applies there because if you don't bring the sacrifice, you can't eat sacrificial meat. And you're actually obligated, right? That's a mitzvah. Here, if you don't get rid of your nazirut and you push off your sacrifices, there's no harm done. Okay, so you can drink wine. That's reshut, that's optional. It's not a mitzvah to drink wine. You might say chiddush and all that, putting that aside, okay? Because that's a little different. It's not like eating sacrificial meat, which is an actual mitzvah, okay? To drink wine of chiddush is not an actual mitzvah. Mitzvah, make chiddush, but not necessarily the drinking of the wine is in the between category. In any case, they say, don't compare it to there, so you can't compare it to the chatat chelev, you can't compare it to the chatat yoled. In fact, this is unique because it can't be taken on by means of a vow, the sacrifice. Okay, so there were our four options of chiddush. We end with two, which is either the tiglachat, it's Baal Ta'acher of the tiglachat, or Baal Ta'acher of the, I'm sorry, I just got confused with the previous. The chiddush is that since you could theoretically shave after doing one sacrifice, therefore, maybe you're not obligated in Baal Ta'acher, even though you didn't bring all three, right? That means that because you could theoretically end your nazirut with only one out of the three, maybe Baal Ta'acher doesn't apply. And the second is, since you can't take it upon yourself with wording of a vow. Next section. Now we're done with that Now we're done with that part of the braita of the Baal Ta'achir. We're now moving to another part of the braita. Amar Mar is always quoting something that we mentioned earlier, and now we're going to go more in depth. Uma Nedarim, another comparison between Nedarim and nazirut. Ma Nedarim ha'av nefer nidrei bito, a father can annul the vows of his daughter, or a Baal nefer nidrei ishto, husband can nullify the vows of his wife. Af nazirut, likewise, nazirut is the same thing. Ha'av mefer nazirut bito, u'ba'al mefer nazirut ishto. So, if I take upon nazirut, if I'm not married, my father can annul it. If I'm married, my husband can annul it. Lama li heikesh, titi b'mematzinu. So now the Gemara questions this heikesh. Why do you need a juxtaposition? It's a much simpler way to learn it. It's just obvious. Nazirut is a type of vow. Just like you take on nazirut as a vow. You say, I vow I'm going to be a nazir, hareini nazir. So therefore, whatever laws apply to Nedarim shall apply here as well. To which the Gemara says, well, there's a difference. Dilma gabe Nedarim hu demefer. You might have thought, again, you have to have I might have thought, and that's why we need the juxtaposition. Dilma gabe Nedarim hu demefer. Mishum delo ile kitsuta. By vows, if I take a vow, I'm vowing that I won't eat apples ever. There's no end to that vow. So because of that, maybe the husband or father is allowed to annul it. It's a very long-standing vow. Aval gabe nazirut ile kitsuta. But nazirut has an end game. Distam nazirut lamed yom. If I don't specify how long it is, we assume it's 30 days. So therefore, amalo, maybe we don't allow the father or because what's the big deal? So it's for 30 days, she'll be a nazir. What's the worst case? What's the worst thing that can happen? Maybe we don't allow the husband to annul those vows. Kamashmalan. That's why you needed the juxtaposition, the heikesh, to teach you, no, it applies just as well. They can annul it just like the neder. Now we're moving back to the original Mishna. Okay, this was all going into depth in that braita that we brought on Daf Gimel. Now we're back to the Mishna. The Mishna on Bet Amud Aleph, first stop of our Masechet, said, second part of our Mishna was Haomer lechavero, certain languages, mudrani mimcha, mufrashni mimcha, muruchachni mimcha, which are all languages of I'm distancing myself from you. Shani ochel lecha, shani to'em lecha, that I won't eat from you, that I won't taste anything from you. Asur, they're forbidden. To which Shmuel now says, Amar Shmuel, bekulan, if you say the word just mudrani mimcha, okay, the question is this 3 cases or is it 5 cases? Mudrani, mufrashni, muruchachni, shani ochal, shani to'em. So comes Shmuel, he says it's really 3 cases. It's bekulan ad shiomar shani ochal lecha, shani to'em lecha. If you say mudrani mimcha or mufrashni mimcha, muruchachni mimcha, I'm distancing myself from you, that's not enough. That's not a neder until you say that I won't eat from you, that I won't taste from you. Without that, it doesn't apply. To which the Gemara is going to bring questions from a braita. Braita says, made today. First question is from one braita, then we're going to have another braita. Mudar ani mimcha, mufrashni mimcha, meruchachni mimcha, harei ze asur. Difference between this and our Mishnah is after the first 3, it already says harei ze asur. Our Mishnah listed 5 and then said harei ze asur or asur. This braita says 1, 2, 3 is asur, and then it says shani ochal lecha, shani to'em lecha, harei ze asur. Sounds like there's 3 cases; those are forbidden. And also those 2 cases are forbidden. It sounds like they're not connected one to the other. It's not like mufrashni plus shani ochal or shani to'em. To which the Gemara says, hachi katani. This is what it means. Ba'med dvarim amurim be'omer shani ochal lecha, shani to'em lecha. In other words, it says mufrashni, mufrashni, muruchachni, mudarani. All those are asur. And the second line comes to say under the condition that you added these words to it. It's not enough to just say, I'm distancing myself. You have to be more specific in what way for it to apply. But wait a minute. If you want to say it works 1, 2, 3, is in the case where you said the next 2. But it doesn't work with this braita, the second braita that has it all flipped. It starts with shani ochal lecha, shani to'em lecha, asur. And then it says, mudrani mimcha, mufrashni mimcha, muruchachni mimcha, harei ze asur. So you can't say add the words, right? The second line meant, in what case is this true? Because we want to say that ani ochal lecha, ani to'em lecha are all relating to the second line. That's much harder to say, although not really. To which the Gemara says, Ukfar Amar Mudrani. So, case, right, line 1 is you say Shani Ochal Shani To'emcha, and that's in the case where you already said Mudrani or Mufrashni or Meruchakni. So it's true, it's the different order, but it also really means the same thing. To which the Gemara is going to ask 2 questions. Ihachi hainu reisha. Reisha normally means the first part of the braita, then doesn't make sense. In this case, it's not the first part of the braita. It's really saying, then why do we have 2 braitot with opposite orders? Doesn't make sense. In other words, sounds like each braita is saying something a little different than the other. And in which case, why do we need both? If they're both saying the exact same thing, that it's only going to work if you combine the 2, right? One from one row and one from the other row, then they're basically saying the exact same thing. Ve'od, and furthermore, asur lamali lamine. In the middle of both, right? Both braitas had case 1, 2, or 1, 2, and 3, and then it said harez asur. This is forbidden. And then it had case 2, right? The next 2 or 3 cases, and then it said harez asur, which sounds like we have those and we have those, and they're separate cases. Otherwise, you wouldn't put harez asur in the middle of it. So therefore, Shmuel is quite difficult. We're going to stop here and start tomorrow with the end of the stuff, which is another explanation of Shmuel. Ela Amar Shmuel. Shmuel's going to read. We're going to have a bit of a different explanation of Shmuel, since this explanation of Shmuel really didn't make a lot of sense in light of the braita that we saw. With that, we'll finish today's stuff. I just want to point out one more thing, which is, there was a lot of, tedious kind of things. What this is really getting at, this whole daf, is what's the nature of neder versus nazir, right? Particularly the focus was on nazir. How is nazir different? How are the sacrifices from nazir different from other sacrifices? How is a neder different from a nazirut? How is it similar? In what ways, right? They're more getting to concepts of what is the nature of nazirut, what is the nature of nedarim, right? And in what cases in what ways do they differ? That's it for today. Wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov.